Carl Jung said that many times what we think is humility is actually fear in disguise. And few masks are so well accepted by the world as the one called humility. How many times do we stay quiet in a situation, not because we have nothing to say, but because we feel that if we speak up, we will be judged? How many times do we accept crumbs of attention, respect, space, and call it meekness? Is it really? Maybe you have already noticed this in yourself. That moment when a bright idea crosses your mind, but you swallow hard and don't share it. Not because you don't believe in it, but because you are afraid. Afraid of seeming arrogant. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid someone will say, "Who do you think you are?" So, to avoid this discomfort, we hide behind a nice speech. I prefer not to stand out. I don't want to compete. What matters is the group. But deep down, what we are really doing is trying not to bother anyone, trying not to take the space that, secretly, we know belongs to us. Are we confusing humility with self-denial? Is this silence we use as a shield really peace? Or is it fear of our own light? Jung said that everything we deny in ourselves, sooner or later, demands a price. What if what we are suffocating is not pride, but power? What if what we call humility is actually a fear so old, so deep, that it became part of our identity? What would happen if we stopped hiding? Would we be able to bear the weight of our true greatness? Here is where the paradox begins. Because what looks like virtue may be escape, and what looks like ego may actually be the deepest call of our soul for freedom. Now, we need to face this fear directly. We need to understand where it comes from, because only when we understand its roots can we begin to break this cycle. Jung warned us. Everything that is not brought into our awareness shows up in our lives as destiny. And maybe this fear, dressed as humility, is exactly that. An unconscious destiny we carry as if it were a choice. The truth is, many of us were taught from early on to dim our own light, so others would not feel uncomfortable. We grew up hearing that those who show off too much are vain, that those who talk too much want attention, that those who assert themselves are arrogant. Little by little, we started to believe shining is wrong. Having a voice, having presence, having ambition, all of this needed to be hidden. So, what did we do? We buried it. We buried our desire to do great things. We buried our boldest ideas. We even buried our truth, afraid of being seen as someone full of themselves. But Jung called this repression, and all repression, sooner or later, leads to imbalance. In Jung's language, what is repressed becomes part of the shadow, that part of our psyche where we keep everything we cannot accept about ourselves. And ironically, it is there that much of our potential lives. When we deny ourselves in the name of false humility, we put in the shadow the very strength that could transform us. We reject courage, leadership, expression. We reject who we really are. But the most dangerous part is that we don't realize it. We think we are being spiritual, ethical, compassionate. And as we convince ourselves we don't need to be seen, we get used to invisibility. We convince ourselves our place is in the background, that our role is to support, but never to lead. And here is the trap. The more we deny this part of ourselves, the further we move away from the process of individuation, which, according to Jung, is the path to becoming whole. Because it's not about being great to be better than others. It's about fully living who we are, with everything that includes, including strength, including shining. If we don't recognize this fear disguised as virtue, it quietly controls us. And we spend life serving an image we created to be accepted. The image of someone good, calm, restrained. But inside, carrying frustration, guilt, and a constant feeling of betraying ourselves. And maybe this is why so many people live with inner conflict, even when doing everything right. Because what is right for others is not always true for us, and it is this distance between who we are and who we pretend to be that makes us sick inside. But what happens when we let this mask fall? What do we see when we face the emptiness left by humility that, deep down, was fear? Maybe you have already felt this, a quiet discomfort, like you are doing everything right, but still something inside you screams. A feeling that you are always making yourself smaller to fit where you no longer belong. You don't stand up for yourself. You don't show who you really are. You don't take risks. And this looks good in the eyes of the world. But inside, it hurts. This is how that fear, disguised as humility, starts shaping our lives without us noticing. Because it's not just about staying quiet in a meeting. It's not just about accepting invitations we don't want or not sharing our opinion. It's deeper. It's like little by little, you are disappearing from yourself. A silent giving up. Carl Jung said that what we avoid in ourselves controls us. And fear, when it's not faced head-on, becomes our hidden guide. It chooses our words, our relationships, our decisions. And the scariest part? We don't even realize we are being led by it, because we learn to explain everything, to say we are being humble, patient, understanding, when really, we are being driven by a fear that became a habit. This is where cognitive biases come in, those unconscious distortions that make us see the world in a limited way. One of them is confirmation bias. We start looking for proof that our behavior is the right one. We hold on to phrases like, "the last will be first," or "those who exalt themselves will be humbled," but we twist their real meaning to justify our own self-denial. And the longer we live like this, the more we strengthen this conditioning. Like an animal trained not to cross an electric fence, even when the fence is gone, we stay frozen in the same place. Our mind has been trained to fear exposure, rejection, the chance of being misunderstood. So, we stay silent, out of habit. But this conditioning also affects our feelings. We create guilt for wanting more. We feel shame for standing out. And this even spoils our relationships, because people who keep denying themselves start attracting those who feed off that. People who need you to stay small so they feel big. People who confuse your kindness with weakness and your giving with obligation. Deep down, this cycle takes us away from authenticity. We shape ourselves so much to other people's expectations that we lose ourselves. And when this happens, the price is high. Chronic frustration, a feeling of emptiness, low self-esteem, and even psychosomatic illnesses. And all of this comes from a fear so subtle, so well hidden, that it shows up as a good quality. But now that we can see the mechanism behind this trap, the inevitable question is, how do we get out of it? How do we break this cycle without becoming what we have always feared? How do we stop denying ourselves without falling into the opposite extreme of arrogance or an inflated ego? The answer, according to Jung, is not about choosing between hiding or showing off. It is something much deeper, to integrate what was rejected, to bring to light what we pushed into the shadow. Not to show it off like a trophy, but to finally become whole. Because when we talk about rebellion, we are not talking about shouting, imposing, or beating others. We are talking about a silent but revolutionary act, allowing ourselves to exist fully, to look inside and say, without fear, "This is also me," including the strength, including the ambition, including the desire to grow, to take up space, to influence the world around us. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who we really are, beyond social masks. And to start this journey, we first need to make peace with our own light. Yes, our light. What someone once tried to erase in us. What we were taught to hide. Maybe you know people like this. People who, after a lifetime of silence, one day decided to speak. Not to impose themselves, but to free themselves. People who seemed quiet, but carried a sleeping volcano inside. And when they decided to wake up, they didn't shout. They shone. They didn't hurt. They inspired. These people did not become selfish. On the contrary, by accepting themselves, they became more generous. Because when we stop denying ourselves, we stop needing others to approve us. We begin to offer our presence as a gift, not as a demand. And this starts with small actions, saying no when before we would say yes, just to please, defending an idea even knowing someone might disagree, looking people in the eyes, keeping your posture, not apologizing for existing. These are simple gestures, but they require great courage, the courage to be. Jung taught us that what we resist in ourselves weakens us, but what we integrate transforms us. So maybe it's time to stop running from what makes us powerful. Because true humility is not hiding. It is recognizing that there is something great inside us and still keeping our feet on the ground. It is a dance between strength and sensitivity, between presence and listening, between courage and compassion. And when we learn to dance like this, we stop living in the shadow of fear. We start living in the light of truth. But this choice does not come from outside. No one can free us from our own prison. The rebellion must come from within, silent, firm, and final. And when it happens, everything changes. The way we speak, walk, and place ourselves in the world. So, if there is a moment to begin this transformation, that moment is now. Because maybe what we called humility was always just a cry for help. And now, finally, we can answer that call. But to do this, we still need to understand something bigger, something that changes everything, something that comes now, in the final revelation. There is a moment on the journey when everything becomes silent. The outside voices no longer have much power. Fear begins to quiet down. And the question that echoes inside us is no longer, what will others think? But instead, who did I stop being to fit their expectations? Carl Jung said that the greatest tragedy of a human being is not making mistakes, but living a life that is not yours. And when we finally understand this, something inside us breaks, so that something much more true can be born. The truth is simple, but so deep that it hurts. We were not created to please. We were created to manifest, to express what is unique in us, to be a channel for something that could only be revealed through our existence. And this manifestation does not happen when we are trying to look humble. It only happens when we are truly connected to who we are, when we stop asking for permission to exist, when we understand that if God gave us a voice, a vision, a strength, it was not to hide it, it was to bring it into the world. True humility is not denying yourself. It is the affirmation that what we have is not only ours, but it is also not small. It is the courage to look inside, see the light, and not step back from it. That is why the greatest achievement is not to become someone better in the eyes of the world. It is to become whole in the eyes of your own soul. It is to be able to lay your head on the pillow and know, today, I was me. No disguises, no masks, no dimming your light to avoid bothering others. And when we do this, life changes, because the whole universe responds to this truth. Opportunities appear, connections align, peace settles, not because everything is perfect, but because finally we are at home within ourselves. That is why Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And awakening is this, realizing that fear was never humility. It was just a veil. And now that it has fallen, we can see what was always there, our essence waiting to be lived. So, if you have come this far, maybe you are ready for the turning point. Maybe you have realized that denying yourself is not noble, it is self-sabotage. That hiding your greatness is not a sign of balance, but of prison. And maybe, for the first time, you are realizing that the world does not need more humble people in the twisted sense of the word. The world needs whole people. People who are not afraid to be a beacon, even if that lights up other people's shadows. people who choose to live with courage and no longer with fear disguised as kindness. Because, in the end, the greatest service we can give the world is to be true. If this message touched your heart in some way, if it made you think, remember who you really are, or even notice something that was hidden inside you, then I warmly invite you to subscribe to this channel. It helps a lot to keep sharing reflections that awaken the soul. If you liked the video, please leave your like. It's a simple but powerful way to say, "This message was worth it." And if you want, share here in the comments. What touched you the most? What made you stop and think? I would love to read about your experience, and who knows, your words might also light something inside someone else. We are together on this journey.